Hi everyone, welcome to this episode. I am Mari and today we are here with Gaia and Sirin to talk about bordered education. When dreaming of studying in Italy turns into navigating endless paperwork, silence and waiting, something's not right. This episode pulls back the curtain on the Italian university system, from the hopeful application to the exhausting enrollment maze. Non-EU students share what the brochures don't show: delays, confusion, and the silent struggles behind the scenes. Is higher education in Italy truly accessible to everybody, or do migration policies and bureaucratic barriers quietly shape who gets through the gates? The right to education has been recognized as a human right in a number of international conventions, among which the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, crucial to ensure the dignity of all individuals. It encompasses the obligation to eliminate discrimination at all levels of educational system, including the university system. The right to study is also provided by Article 34 of the Italian Constitution, in the framework of the fundamental constitutional principle, constitutional judgments, and state and regional legislation. The right to education can be interconnected with the right to freedom of movement, enshrined in Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and in many other international conventions. These rights include, besides the right to freedom of movement within the country of nationality, the right to leave one's own country. It means that a person has the right to leave the country of nationality to seek a better education. Millions of students migrate each year for educational purposes, benefiting from scholarships, exchange programs, and international universities. In this context, freedom of movement directly supports the right to education. Moreover, in contexts in which the right to education is violated for various reasons, such as conflicts, gender-based discrimination, or political repression, the right to freedom of movement allows students and families to seek for protection in other countries in which the right to education is guaranteed. Other important aspects made possible by the interconnection of these two rights are the cultural exchanges, academic cooperation, and the internationalization of knowledge. The latter allows students and teachers to gain a broader perspective on global issues, to learn to consider different cultural contexts, and to develop critical thinking on a global scale. It also fosters intercultural understanding and respect for diversity. However, these rights are not equally distributed among all the countries of the world. We are facing a global-scale discrimination towards a large number of countries, the majority of which belong to the so-called Global South. The visa policies, especially the one carried out by Western countries, make the accessibility to the right to movement interconnected with the right to education almost impossible to exercise for a certain number of students, who often see their visa's application for study reasons denied. In some cases, it happens due to procedural mistakes linked to a general level of awareness towards some nationalities and the willingness recently arose in the Western political environment to make the accessibility to Western university harder, as also proved by the testimony of a young woman who recently arrived in Italy for study purposes that we will hear shortly. The discretionary way in which visas are granted, often influenced by stereotypes, biases, or political agendas, makes the system opaque and discriminatory. Visas thus represent invisible borders, and they become instruments of selection. They determine who has the right to move, study, work, or simply visit other countries. This is not only about migration control, but about the true hierarchy of mobility, where one's passport of birth dictates access to the world. As Padurai states, it is important to highlight the need to look at rights not only as a formal status, but by measuring the ability of different subjectivities to put them into practice effectively. In this case, on paper, all the students of the world are equal, but in practice, they are not. For many students, visas represent a barrier to exercising their right to education, in contradiction with the principle of universality and equality. Visa policies built new walls, invisible yet powerful, which hinder the free movement of people and contribute to the perpetuation of global inequalities. But why do people choose to study in Europe even though it's a hard process? Let's listen to some interview of our colleagues from the MIDI course of Palermo University.
My name is Zoya Salman. I'm from Pakistan, and the reason why I chose to come to Europe for my master's is because I really wanted to explore the master's programs in Europe, and I liked the fact that they were much more comprehensive than the ones in Pakistan. And I started searching up for programs in UNIPA, and I found the program of my choice, which was not being offered, sadly, in my own country. That is exactly why I chose to come to Europe.
My name is Bridget. I come from Tasmania, which is a little island at the bottom of Australia. And I chose to come to Palermo because it's the only course like it. We don't have a course like this in the Southern Hemisphere. And I wanted to get a perspective from the global north about what's actually happening in migration, particularly in migration by sea.
All right, my name is Suleiman Sane. I'm from the Gambia. Yeah, my reason of coming to Europe, specifically Italy, to study my masters was more based on the fact that here it is more affordable like comparing it to other places, and also like when I made the application here the program that they are offering is more in line to the area that I'm interested in. So I was more interested in the issue of migrations back in the country, and this is the area that this university is offering. So for me, this basically that is the reason why I come to this university.
So we just listened to three of our colleagues from different parts of the world that decide to study in Italy. They confirmed the trend of an Europe that became an increasingly attractive destination for students from outside the European Union, and the numbers speak for themselves. In 2023 only, the European Union issued over 3.7 million first resident permits to non-EU citizens, with education reasons accounting for 14.3%. More than 500,000 permits, a growth of 13.5% compared to 2022. This surge reflects more than just statistical momentum. It illustrates how Europe's combination of world-class university, cost-effective tuition, extensive mobility schemes, and post-study opportunities creates a compelling ecosystem for ambitious learners. At the heart of Europe's appeal is its academic excellence. Index US World University Rankings Europe 2025 placed ETH Zurich at the summit, followed by Imperial College London and the University of Oxford, underscoring the continent's concentration of top-tier research institutions. For many students, the chance to learn under leading scholars and access cutting-edge research facilities often embedded in centuries-old universities such as Bologna and Salamanca, is a defining motivator. Yet, world ranking alone does not tell the whole story. Compared with traditional destinations like North America or Australia, Europe generally offers lower tuition fees. Many programs charge between 900 and 4,200 per year for non-EU students, depending on the country and level of study. Beyond headline fees, financial support abounds through initiatives like the Erasmus Mundus Joint Masters, which fully funds tuition, travel, and living costs for top candidates, and through hundreds of national and university-level scholarships aimed at reducing the financial barriers for international students. Another pull factor is Europe's streamlined credit recognition system and mobility pathways. The European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System, ECTS, standardizes credits across more than 40 higher education systems, making it straightforward for students to spend semesters in different countries without losing progress toward their degrees. Complementing this, the Erasmus Plus program exempts students from tuition, registration, and examination fees at host institutions, while offering grants to cover living costs, turning multi-country study into both an academic and cultural adventure. Perhaps equally important to prospective students is the promise of career development and post-study stay. Countries such as Germany grant non-EU graduates a residence permit of up to 18 months to seek employment, during which they may work part-time or full-time to support themselves. Similar schemes across the EU not only help students gain valuable work experience, but also facilitate long-term retention of international talent, supporting Europe's innovation ecosystem. Finally, Europe's political leadership openly courts international scholars and researchers. In late April 2025, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen invited scientists worldwide to make Europe their home, highlighting the bloc's commitment to open scientific discourse and stable research funding, even as some competing destinations face funding cuts and political uncertainty. This message reinforces the perception of Europe not just as a place to study, but as a welcoming hub for lifelong academic and professional growth. Taken together, these factors, rising permit numbers, prestigious universities, manageable costs, seamless mobility, structured post-study pathways, and a supportive research environment, explain why more students from extra-EU countries choose Europe for their higher education journey. However, having a strong reason to undertake this long journey is not enough. Now you have to start your visa application. Imagine sleepless night, hitting refresh on your inbox every few minutes, and your heart racing every time a notification pops up.
That's the daily reality of thousands of young people who have placed their dreams in the hands of visa officers. Out of every 10 applicants dreaming of studying in Italy, more than one will hear just one word: no. Rejection rate in Italy is 12.7%. But these aren't just numbers. Each one represents someone's hard-earned savings, someone's carefully laid out plans, hours spent filling out forms, gathering documents, double-checking translations, and sometimes a sea of broken ambitions, an ocean of silent tears. Students from countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, or even Japan face relatively smooth and predictable processes. In contrast, applicants from Middle Eastern, African, or parts of Asian countries face higher rejection rates, more scrutiny, and longer waiting times, even though they met all requirements, submit full documentation, and they are still denied, often with no clear justification. This raises a fundamental question. When all requirements are met, what justifies disparities? Arrival in Italy sounds like the start of a great story, right? Well, easier said than done, at least if you are coming from outside the EU. So, what's the real roadmap to Italy? Here it is. A user manual for your dreams. If you're lucky and just persistent enough, your dream might actually come true. But first, you have got a few checkpoints to get through. The first one is the decision. Decide that you really want it. Seems to be the easiest part, right? What if I tell you that it's not? It's not because every decision has its consequences. In that case, the consequence is the risk of rejection. If you want to study in Italy, you need to be ready for the potential troubles. If you are aware of what you really want, what's in the bottom of your heart, and decide to do that, you also need to be ready to hear no. Because wanting it truly, deeply, might still not be enough. This decision isn't hard because it's unclear. It's hard because it's vulnerable. You are putting your dream on the table and handing someone else the power to stamp it approved or denied. So no, the first step isn't just a choice, it's courage. And that's exactly where your journey begins. And then we arrive to the second checkpoint, the mental preparation for the paper chase. Are you thinking that you will just gather some papers and send them in? Are you always such an optimist? Not this time. This part takes time, more than you think. You need to apply for the visa at least 3 months before your planned departure. But let's be real. If you actually want to make it to the first class, you better start way earlier. Because paperwork is like a marathon, and it's not optional. Then we arrive to the third checkpoint, the mountain of documents. If your program is over 90 days, spoiler probably is, you're applying for a Type D visa. So, what goes into the infamous visa packet? A fill-out visa application form, recent passport photo, a passport valid for 3+ months beyond your visa, proof of enrollment or pre-enrollment in an Italian university, proof of accommodation in Italy, proof of financial support, usually at least €467 per month, which means a total of €6,000 per year. This is the baseline, but heads up, the exact amount is officially set and updated every year by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and might slightly vary depending on your country of origin or current regulations. Health insurance covering medical treatment and hospitalization, proof of funds for your return journey, proof of language skill, Italian or English depending on your program. And remember, submitting everything doesn't guarantee approval. You're not buying a ticket, you are asking for permission. Visa fee? Now €135, another number worth remembering. Here we are to the fourth checkpoint, the consulate expedition. Once your documents are ready, your next destination is not Italy, it's your local Italian consulate. And yes, you need to go in person. As of January 10, 2025, long-term visa applicants must book individual appointments for biometric data collection. Sounds simple? Maybe, but there's a catch. Consulates aren't always nearby. Many students have to travel long distances just for the fingerprint. That means more time, more money, and more stress. On top of that, this new step will likely slow things down. Expect longer processing times, earlier application deadlines, and potentially messed up academic calendars. Finally, we have the last checkpoint, the fifth one. Waiting for permission. You have climbed the paper mountain, survived the fingerprinting odyssey. Now, you wait. Visa processing usually takes 1 to 3 weeks, but you will need to book your visa interview 4 to 6 weeks in advance. So yes, you will be refreshing your inbox again.
But let's talk about more concrete things now. Numbers and data. We love data, don't we? In Italian higher education, well, we have top universities like Sapienza University of Rome, the University of Bologna, and the Polytechnic University of Milan, which lead in absolute numbers of international students, attracting thousands every year from around the world. In this context, the University of Palermo is expanding its international profile. In 2023, it hosted 877 international students, out of a total student body of 43,655. While still modest in proportion, this marks a meaningful step towards greater global engagement. The university also saw 145 international students enrolling in their first year and 115 completing their degrees, indicating both growing interest and also academic success among foreign students. Palermo's efforts to internationalize education are reflected in the expansion of English-taught programs, which now include over 20 initiatives, and in robust academic mobility, with 926 outgoing and 616 incoming Erasmus participants only in 2023. These programs enhance intercultural exchange and global competence across the university community. Nonetheless, for these positive trends to continue and scale, institutional initiatives must be supported by national policies, and particularly around streamlined visa processes and improved access for non-EU students. The University of Palermo is clearly opening up to the world. Ensuring that international students can access education with ease is the next essential step. Now, when we talk about visas, we necessarily say that getting visas to travel to Europe, for whatever reason, has never been simple. But recent data shows that for some nationalities, it's not just difficult, but nearly impossible. According to the Schengen Visa Info website, only in 2022, Italy was among the Schengen countries with the highest visa refusal rates. In 2023 alone, Italy rejected nearly half of all visa applications for different purposes, including education, from several countries, for example, with Algeria facing the highest refusal rate at 46.1%, followed by Ghana, Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, which at last has a rate of 39.4%. And then there's what's happening to international students. You'd think that theoretically, being admitted to European university with the right documents and even scholarships would make the visa process easier than for a person seeking a tourist or work visa. But in practice, that hasn't been the case in Italy. Earlier this year, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, also called the Farnesina, came under heavy criticism for rejecting a large number of student visa applications from African and Asian countries. These were not just random applicants. They were actually students who had been accepted to legitimate Italian universities. Many had won scholarships. They'd gone through all the right steps. And yet, when they applied for a student visa, their applications were refused, sometimes with nothing more than a vague sentence like requirements not met, and with no specific explanation as to what was missing or wrong. And this is the exact thing that had happened to Raha, and that we'll go back to later. One case which was very recent is that of a group of Iranian students that had applied for long-term study visas to pursue a course in Italy. September 20th, 2024. The Italian embassy in Tehran shut down the portal dedicated to visa-metric visa bookings because of the high demand, and left the 1,000 Iranian students that had applied waiting for their visa appointments with no updates. Even though they were eligible for a visa, as in they had no missing documents or any problems with their files, many students never heard back until November 29th, which was the deadline. And still nothing. I must precise that many of these students had lost scholarships, they had lost dorm spaces, and they had already paid for flights and language exams. All in all, the delays jeopardized their entire academic dreams, and the embassy's silence only made things worse for hundreds of people. The Italian academic community was even more outraged. I mean, why wouldn't they? Professors and universities called out the injustice. Some said that they felt humiliated that their own government was discrediting the institutions they represent by refusing to recognize valid admissions and claiming that the documents provided by the students were wrong, or even worse, that they were forged. The Italian Union of University Students said that the rejections were discriminatory, accusing the system of operating on preconceived notions of risk when it comes to students coming from the global south. But it gets even worse when we look at what's been happening to Afghan students. After the Taliban took over in 2021, many Afghan students were granted scholarships to study abroad, including in Italy. Some were accepted to Italian universities through special humanitarian or academic programs. But despite receiving offers and sometimes even full sponsorships, many are still waiting, and not just for their visas, but for an appointment at the Italian consulate. The waiting time? In some cases, it's over a year. So think about that. These are young people who have fled the regime that bans girls from schools and suppresses academic freedom. This is exactly a case in which the right to education is interconnected with the right of movement. Both rights are fundamental human rights, but they're clearly not accessible for everyone, as we can see it in this case, where these students have been kept waiting in an administrative limbo. Some students have reported missing their academic year entirely because they couldn't even get a consular appointment on time. Others fear that their scholarships might be cancelled if they don't show up soon. These are not just bureaucratic delays, but lost futures. And they expose a serious gap between Italy's foreign policy, rhetoric, and the lived experiences of those seeking protection and education. So what's going wrong? Well, the foreign ministry has largely stayed silent, citing generic reasons such as the security concerns or the risk of irregular student migration. But critics always argued that such justifications are too broad and too conveniently applied to the same regions again and again. What we're seeing is not just a logistical backlog, it's a structural barrier that filters applicants not based on merit or motivation, but on the passport they hold. Italy hosts international conferences, promotes academic exchange, and even funds scholarships for students from the global south. But if these students can't even get a visa, what's the point of all this? It becomes nothing more than a battle, and not an administrative procedure. And now, we'll hear an interview made by Luciana, our colleague on this podcast, with a student named Raha, whose case stood out among all students after a double denial of visa application, and an appeal made by a lawyer supported by a team of professors from our university. Her story will demonstrate how situations that appear extreme, out of the ordinary, or even unthinkable are actually very common, because of a recurring and nearly customary trend of students' visa applications being denied to Italian colleges.
Okay, Raha, could you tell us about you and your journey to come to university, your general experience, please?
Thank you, Luciana, for asking. My name is Raha. I'm a law graduate from Bangladesh with a heart rooted in justice and a mindset on change. I was accepted into the master's program in migration rights and integration at the University of Palermo, a path that aligned perfectly with my passion for human rights, dignity, and mobility. My journey hasn't been easy. I had to navigate not just academics, but borders, bureaucracy, and silence. Yet every step, from graduation to convocation and from scholarship offers to legal battles, has deepened my commitment to the very principles I now study. For me, this degree is not just an academic milestone, it's personal, it's lived, and its resistance turned into purpose.
What were the reasons for the denial of your visa application?
It was a very petty reason, but the denial of my visa was more than a bureaucratic failure. It was a blow to my integrity. The embassy claimed without proof that my documents were forged, and I had lack of financial sufficiency in our bank account. It felt like my honesty, my hard work, and my future were all being dismissed with a single stamp. But I stood firm. I responded not with anger, but with clarity, evidence, and faith in the truth, and also to my God. It was painful but also revealing. I saw how a migration system can fail the very people they should protect. And I realized that my fight was no longer just for admission, but for accountability and justice.
Could you tell us about the intervention of the university in your case and why, among all the students facing similar situations, they decided to stood up on your behalf with a lawyer?
I am so grateful to our university, University of Palermo, that I cannot even explain with some mere words. What made a difference was the University of Palermo's response. In the darkest hour, I found professors who were like angels, unexpected light in a time of despair. They didn't just support me on paper, they stood beside me with conviction, compassion, and courage. Some reached out to authorities, offered other legal help and emotional guidance also. And all of them believed in me when the system didn't. And the system literally failed there, where the professors and the university stood with me. Why did they advocate for me out of many? Perhaps because I didn't vanish when things got hard. I stayed present, respectful, and honest, and also truthful to every step. I believe they saw that this wasn't just about a student seeking a degree, it was about a future advocate for migration justice fighting her first real battle. And that's what this program is all about. I think they saw that this wasn't just about one student's struggle, but about everything we study here, borders, justice, and the people caught in between. And that's a real experience that they are taught in here in the university.
Thank you so much, Raha, for sharing your experience with us.
So, what have we uncovered? We began with a right, the right to education, a right that, on paper, belongs to all, a right recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, by the EU Charter and national constitution, including Italian one. But rights mean little without access. And for thousands of students from Africa, Middle East, and parts of Asia, access is denied at a gate. Not because they are unqualified, not because they lack documentation, but because of suspicion, systemic bias, and opaque visa policies that place discretion above dignity. We saw how Europe attracts students with world class universities, lower tuition fees, mobility programs, and promising futures. Yet, these opportunities are unevenly distributed. We saw the numbers, shockingly high visa rejection rates. We heard the testimonies, students like Raha, who, despite fulfilling every requirement, were denied. And we saw the silence, embassies that do not respond, offices that keep no data, decisions made with no transparency. This is more than a technical problem, it is a question of justice. A question of whose dreams are allowed to cross border and whose are left behind. If Europe is to live up to its ideals of equality, opportunity, and human dignity, it must confront this hidden border. It must recognize that visas, when misused, are not just documents. They are decisions that shape lives, futures, and the very meaning of education. And so, to every student still waiting, still fighting, still dreaming, you are not alone. And your story, your resistance, is part of a larger movement for fairness, transparency, and true academic freedom. Because the right to study should not depend on where you are from. It should depend on who you are and who you aspire to become. This was Bordered Education. Thank you for listening.